couple tips for rig fishing. Use the appropriate weight. Same applies in your rigs as it does for your jigs, making sure that you're using the proper amount of weight, that you're dropping straight down, you're not taking everybody else out based on the conditions. Bouncing versus dragging your sinker is what I talked about before. Don't bounce your sinker, right? And we see this again all the time. It will affect not just how many bites you're gonna get, it's gonna affect your buddy next to you. So if you're constantly doing this, either because you can't feel the bottom and you're constantly making sure that you're on the bottom, or the boat's pitching back and forth, and you've heard this a million times, you have to fish a little bit of a slack line, and we'll talk about that shortly. So keep the sinker on the bottom. If you keep doing this, your chances of success bouncing that sinker off the bottom is not going to work. Casting up current, the same applies here as it does with a jig. When I'm on Jerry's boat, if it's possible, I like to fish all the way on the starboard side, all the way up by the mate station. I can cast way up into the current, and the same thing, I can work it back. A lot of times the fish are positioned into the current. So I have all that addition. If I've casted 50 feet, I have that 50 feet that I can work that sinker back until I find, hopefully, the hot spot, and then try to duplicate that if I'm catching fish. Flat versus bank sinkers. Everybody has their preference. I prefer the flats because they think that the bank sinkers roll around a little bit. A lot of guys I fish with will paint the sinkers red. If that works for you, if it's a confidence builder, great. I've caught just as many fish on a shiny brand new sinker than I have one that's been in my box for 3 years. So again, it's really a confidence thing. I prefer the flats only because they lay flat on the bottom. You have less time set to roll around. Spinning the baits. So if you're fishing a rig and here's where it attaches to your main line, here's your hook, and it's 2 foot, in a strong current, the bait's gonna spin and fish are not gonna eat it. So a lot of times I like to shorten it up. I might even go to say a 10-inch leader on the snell, just to prevent that bait from spinning around in the current. Everybody's different, every day is different, so you have to adapt. We talked about fishing the slack line. That's super important because again, if you're not fishing the slack line and you're not paying attention and that boat is pitching because of the sea conditions and you're constantly moving the jig up and, or I'm sorry, the rig up and down, this is exactly like I said, what's gonna happen. So obviously we're not on a boat. Slack up a little bit. You want a little slack in your line. You can still feel the bite. You'll feel the bite even if it's a scratchy bite, but you want a little bit of slack. This way, as the boat starts to pitch, that sinker's not coming off the bottom. If you've gone to other seminars, they're gonna tell you the exact same thing for a reason because that's exactly what's gonna happen if you bounce the sinker all over the place. And that applies too for jig, a little bit of slack in the line, but not too much for like I described before. You get this huge bow in your line, you go to set the hook, you're not gonna get any hook in the fish. That's my brother in a nice 8-pounder we caught in early November. Springtime, they move shallow to spawn, so this is all dependent on water temperature. Generally March to May time frame, but this winter has been pretty harsh so far, so unless we get a mild spring, it may push the spawn back a little bit, said based on water temperatures. March in Jersey, the season closes and then it opens back up in April, which in April is kind of almost prime time spawning. I try not to target them as much as I have to, but look, I'm a tog fisherman, I love doing it. Summertime, the bigger fish will seem to set up on the deeper preferred bottom. If you stay inshore, say like Shrewsbury Rocks, if you're down there in 20-some foot of water, you'll catch keepers all day long. All right, but if you're targeting the bigger fish, and I'm not saying the bigger fish don't live there, but again, the bigger fish get to be big by not being stupid. So they seem to move offshore a little bit into their preferred water temperatures, and they'll stay there most of the time, again, until the fall. They're kind of homebodies also. They don't migrate like a fluke where they go offshore and then they come back in. They stay within, say, I don't know, 700-800 yards of their home turf, if you will. That's why you may go to a spot one day and come back the next week and you don't get a bite. Because once people get on it and wipe it out, chances are there's not gonna be a lot of fish there. We all know this fall is the most popular time. This is the time that if your chances are later fall, once again, water dependent temperature, this is probably your best time to catch some of your bigger fish. They're actively feeding, they know what's coming, so they're on the feed. Water temperature drops and it indicates to them that it's time to go eat. And again, most popular time for tog, we all know, is fall and winter time.